I'm just a bill, yes, I'm only a bill, and I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill. World is a long, long journey to the capital city. It's a long, long wait while I'm sitting in committee, but I know I'll be a loss. Yeah, yes, I hope and pray that I'll be, but today
This is Bill Scher on the Liberal Oasis radio show. Good morning. Christmas just around the corner, in case you didn't know. If the giant piles of snow, if the constant commercializing, if the last-minute shopping didn't tell you, fortunately, if you weren't totally sure it was Christmas, we have these messages from our great political leaders.
This time of year, sometimes it's nice to pull aside from all of that and just remember that what really matters is the celebration of the birth of Christ.
So from our family to yours, I'm Barack Obama, and I approve this message.
Merry Christmas.
I'm Rudy Giuliani, and I approve this message. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays.
Aren't you glad? Aren't you glad that we have broken down the walls that Thomas Jefferson created between church and state? So now our political leaders can wish us Merry Christmas unfettered. I got to say, this is much, much better than having Roe v. Wade repealed by a theocratic Supreme Court. It is far better than having theocrats enter the bedroom of Terry Schiavo, meddling with her personal decision to end her vegetative state. If all you really wanted was just to have politicians wish us Merry Christmas and ads, you know what? Fine. You win. But it seems to me that over on the conservative side of the pond, as the evangelical Baptist Michael Huckabee jousts with devout Mormon Mitt Romney, seems that the conservatives are a little bit uncomfortable about the whole blending of church and state thing. Kind of sense they wish they could take that back. Start fresh. Go back to something that, I don't know, Federalist Papers maybe? Something like that. But we're going to talk about that more next week. Local author and activist Frederick Carlson, who is a chronicler of the religious right, he's going to talk about how faith and politics is roiling the Republican side of the presidential primary. This week, there was an historic event this week that you might not know about. This week, the conservative minority of Congress broke the all-time record for filibustering, for obstructing the public will. The 60-second cloture vote. Cloture votes are taken when one side is filibustering. The 60-second cloture vote, what happened in the Senate this week, never in modern history has there been this many cloture votes in a year. The record for a 2-year congressional session was 61 cloture votes. So they beat this with a year to spare. And you may recall, actually you probably don't recall because I'm sure no one's ever reported on it, but my organization, Campaign for America's Future, put out a report this week over at ourfuture.org, the Block and Blame report, that quoted Senator Trent Lotts. You remember him. He said in April, quote, "The strategy of being obstructionist can work or fail, and so far it is working for us." It is deliberate strategy on the part of Trent Lotts and his fellow conservatives to obstruct as much as possible. And that's why, and he thinks it's working, because you do see in the headlines this week, Democrats limp out of Washington. Democrats fail to do X. Democrats can't pass this. The story almost never is conservatives obstruct majority will in Congress. That never seems to enter the picture until maybe the 10th paragraph. But does that mean it's really working for Trent Lotts and George Bush and his fellow conservatives? Consider this. You might have heard that the approval rating for Congress is lower than George Bush, which is about as low as you could possibly get. That's true. But when you break that apart and ask, do you approve of the Democrats in Congress? And do you approve of the Republicans in Congress? Here's how the Republicans do. In the USA Today Gallup poll, this is this month, do you approve of Republicans in Congress? 26% approve. They do better in the ABC Washington Post at 32%, and then in the Harris poll, 23%. So that's how it's working for them. Now, Democrats do badly too, but they do better than the Republicans. For example, in the ABC Washington Post, that's their high water mark. That's 40%. So there is some distinguishing being made by the American people. If you ask me to interpret these numbers, they say, we are upset and frustrated with Democrats not because of what they're fighting for, but because of how hard they're fighting for it. Whereas on the Republican side, I mean, here's what they're fighting against. These are the things that affect you and me that they have obstructed, things that have majority support in Congress and have majority support amongst the people that they obstructed. Ending the occupation of Iraq, providing health insurance to millions more kids, empowering Medicare to negotiate for lower drug prices, taking away handouts to big oil so we can invest in renewable energy, repealing the effective ban on embryonic stem cell research, making it easier for workers to join unions, investing more in health research, fighting poverty, job training so people can have good jobs. These are the things that conservatives said, we don't care that you elected a new Congress to do these things. We're going to block them anyway. And then we're going to blame the congressional majority for not getting anything done. And we'll see how that works for us. That's the best they got. That's their holiday present to you in this holiday season. Because they literally have not proposed anything to solve the pressing problems. They didn't do anything when they were in power for the last 6 years, and they haven't figured out what to do now. Pretty much just talking about tax cuts, and that's it. The tax cuts have always been their magic elixir for everything. In fact, you had George Bush just this week saying the economy is strong because of my tax cuts. And then when pressed, he was actually asked by a commercial lender at a Rotary Club, which I'm sure he thought was a friendly audience, after giving this speech insisting the economy was sound. He was then reminded by an actual citizen that it's not sound. He had to acknowledge, well, there's some storm clouds on the horizon, but the underpinnings are good. Trust me. Trust me. That's the best they got. And Democrats, again, where there's frustration there is tactical. It's strategic. It's not what they're trying to do. It's how they're trying to do it. You know, they have tried to compromise a lot because they really want to say they got something done. That's what they really, and it's very noble. I understand why they want to do it, and obviously the American public wants things to actually get done. They don't want posturing in theater. But here's what happens when you try to compromise with people who don't negotiate in good faith, who aren't serious about solving problems and advancing the country forward. There was an energy bill. I mentioned it last week. The initial bill was going to do a number of things, but the bigger, bolder things not only involved raising auto fuel efficiency for cars, 35 miles per gallon. It also would have mandated that 15% of our electricity comes from renewable energy. And it would, as I mentioned earlier, take away handouts to big oil. You are propping up big oil right now, shifting that into investing in renewable energy so it can be affordable and accessible. And even those steps weren't going to solve the climate crisis by themselves, but they were going to help cut more carbon emissions. That's the real end goal here. Unless you do that, it's all for naught. Republicans, conservatives filibustered two of those three. They filibustered the handouts, ending the handouts to big oil. They filibustered increased renewable energy for creating electricity. And you were left with the bill that only raised the fuel efficiency for cars, which is not bad. But even that itself is actually not going to cut a net amount of carbon emissions. It will just make sure we generate less than we would have over the next 20 years. So George Bush actually signs this, which I got to say, I wasn't even sure he was going to do that, but he did. But then the same day, the exact same day where he gives a big speech on live TV about how they have a great national energy policy, great working across the aisle, the same day his EPA blocks California and 17 other states that want to have stricter standards for auto emissions that would have cut greenhouse gas emissions even more. And their excuse was, hey, we just signed the energy bill. We're on top of this. This just gets in the way. So even when you try to work across the aisle, you try to compromise, you try to do your best to advance the public interest and the common good, conservatives then use that against you to stab you in the back when they hope you're not looking. There's another holiday present for you. So this isn't going to change unless we recognize what's going on, we understand what needs to be done to solve big problems, and we know who is getting in the way, and we put pressure on them or we get rid of them. And that's why we cannot let this block and blame strategy work. I don't think it's working for them, and we can ensure it doesn't work for them if we call attention to it. After the break, we're going to be talking to the folks behind ruralvotes.com. What's going on in Iowa? What's going on in New Hampshire in the presidential race? This is Bill Scher on the Liberal Oasis radio show on WHMP News, Information, and the Arts.